The other notes that we're going to add on to is the 5.4 notes, where we've got the layering of factoring. So it's the same idea, it's the same rules. The thing that takes the longest is that we just have more factoring that we have to apply, okay? So in 5.4, we're just going to go to the end. There was that last part of page 4 that everyone was like, oh, and there wasn't a video for that. So now we're going to finish that out. Alright, so here's where we left off. We actually, we did do example 3 on the last notes. So these, example 3, parts A and B, are filled in, and as well as the 2 practice problems. Oops. Okay, so these 2 practice problems were from last lesson, part 3. So now we're going to pick up here, but it's the same idea. Okay, we are solving again, but now the factoring just has a little bit more depth to it. So what are the real number solutions of the equation? Just like in lesson 4.3, we have to get this equals 0. Remember, that's what we want. We want equals 0, that's standard form. So in order to get a 0 over here, we need to subtract our 10x to the other side. 10x squared, pardon me. And when we do that, you want to write it in descending order. You want to go from the highest exponent down to the no exponent, the constant. So x to the 4th is the first one. Then let's squeeze in 10x squared. Then we're going to finish out with our constant plus 9. So this minus 10x squared fits in the middle of our trinomial. Okay? Now, this is a pretty basic trinomial. We've got 9 and negative 10. Alright, so what numbers multiply to 9 and add to negative 10? That's a negative 1 and a negative 9. Okay, because negative 1 times negative 9 is 9, but when you add, you get negative 10. Okay, so that means that we get x squared minus 1 and x squared minus 9. Okay, the reason why they're x squareds is because that x to the 4th, we need x squared times x squared gives us that x to the 4th. We need to take this 4th power and cut it in half. So I've got 2 of them over here and 2 of them over here. Well, if you notice, this says factor. Okay, so we factored the trinomial. Now we recognize, well, we're not done factoring. We might have done a trinomial, but now this is a binomial. And does it fall under one of our factors? Yes. Okay, this one, we ask ourselves, okay, what times what gives us x squared? That would be x times x gives us x squared. What times what gives us 1? That's 1 times 1. And then since it's minus, it's a positive 1 and a negative 1. Okay? This is the same way. This is what times what gives us x squared, x times x. What times what gives us 9? That's 3 and 3. It's a positive 3 and a negative 3. So this is where our factoring goes from a trinomial. Then you have to recognize, all right, well now I have binomials, so is it one of those patterns? And each of them was one of those patterns. So we had to break down each one more. Now we can't factor these because there's no x squareds. X is as low as it goes. So then each one equals 0. So if this equals 0, you subtract it and you'll get a negative 1. If that one equals 0, you're going to add it and you get a positive 1. If that one equals 0, you're going to subtract the 3 and get negative 3. If that one equals 0, you're going to add the 3 and get a positive 3. So it's the opposite of each of these, because when you solve, you do opposites, okay? So the solutions are negative 1, 1, negative 3, and 3. And what I want to point out is there are 1, 2, 3, 4 answers because we started with a 4th power. So that highest power tells you how many answers you should get. They're not always real, but we can get 4 answers. So since it starts with a 4th power, then I'm not surprised that I get 1, 2, 3, 4 answers, 4 solutions to it. Okay? All right, so that is one example of solving with factoring. Just taking it a little bit more. Just more factoring to it, but the same idea. All right, so let's look at the next thing. All right, so we only have one more, and that's this one. We're finding the real number solution, so we just have to factor it as far as it'll go, and then each one equals 0. This does not say equals 0, so subtract 14x to the third. Subtract 14x to the third. Now I have my equals 0. Okay, but I do have a trinomial, and I want to put it in order. I want it to go from the highest exponent down to the lowest. So I'm going to start with 2x to the fifth. I'm going to squeeze in minus 14x cubed, and then I'm going to finish out with 24x. So I'm just going from the highest to the middle to the last exponent. Okay, I can divide, or I can do a GCF. Okay, what's the GCF of those three terms? And that's a 2x. So if I divide a 2x out, I get x to the fourth minus 7x plus 12. Okay? Oh, x squared, sorry. All right, so this factor is going to be a part of our solving, but I'm going to wait on it for a second. Now let's factor this. The nice thing about this is that it is still basic. So what multiplies to 12 and adds to negative 7? Well, that is a negative 3 and a negative 4. Okay? So far, our factoring is 2x, because that was the GCF, x squared minus 3, and x squared minus 4, because we had an x to the fourth. So we cut that x to the fourth in half. 2 of them go on in this binomial, 2 of them go in that binomial. But then we have to look even closer and say, okay, well, are we done? Now that I have binomials, if you look at your binomials on your flowcharts, on the right side of your flowchart, can either one of those break down more? And they can. This one follows the pattern. We would say x times x gives you x squared, and then 2 times 2 gives you 4, and it's a positive 2, and it's a negative 2. This one doesn't work that way because 3, you can't get the same thing to multiply up to 3, and then you've got 2x still out front. So this is the GCF. This is what we did with our trinomial. Now we're breaking it all the way down from the binomial, okay? So then each one equals 0, okay? And this is where the solving that we're talking about comes into play. This is a factor. So we say 2x equals 0. This is a factor. X squared minus 3 equals 0. X plus 2 equals 0, and x minus 2 equals 0. Each factor equals 0, and then you just solve it. This, you divide both sides by 2, and x is a 0. This is a little bit harder because we haven't talked about solving with square roots, okay? So this, we are going to talk more about it, but I'm not going to actually I'm not going to actually have you solve that the rest of the way. You could say x squared equals 3, and then the opposite of squaring is square rooting, but we're just going to kind of leave this out for now. Okay, because I don't care that much about, let me just write skip. I don't care too much about that part of solving yet, because we're going to get to it. So there are 2 answers here because of the x squared. You subtract 2 from both sides. You get negative 2. And then you add 2 to both sides on this one. And you get positive 2. Okay? So we get this answer, and this answer. And that's 1, 2, 3 answers. Originally, we should have 5, This x to the 5th tells us that there should be 5 solutions. So here's 1, 2, 3 of them, and this one has 2 solutions. This one has 2 solutions. We just didn't find them because we just haven't gotten to that part yet of our solving, okay? All I care about is what I call the real and rational. I can just get real numbers, and they're either fractions or they're whole numbers. And that's what we're solving for right now. That's what we're going for right now, okay? So we're taking it from factoring into solving, and then just however many solutions we get, and it should match up with your highest exponent, okay? Okay.